I'm Laurie Axman with the Penn Center for Innovation. We're Penn's commercialization entity. And we work with faculty, researchers, and some students across campus on their commercialization activities. Our efforts have greatly expanded, I would say, over the last decade. But today I'm really pleased that we could focus on a part of our organization which specifically has grown tremendously. The venture kind of function at PCI, I think, was established about a decade ago. And Michael Poisel, who's the executive director, after its founding by John Swartley, was brought in to lead its growth. Michael has a background, for those who don't know him, well, he has 2 degrees from Penn in engineering and from Wharton. And he was an investor. He actually worked at a tech company, and he brings so much experience working with the early stage startup community based at universities. One thing we're all really proud of at PCI is PCI Ventures has started over 200 companies since it began. And also last year, Penn affiliated startups raised almost $600 million. So we've really seen kind of the innovation ecosystem and the startup activities specifically at Penn from faculty explode over the last decade. It's been really exciting. And today, I'll hand it off to Michael to talk about some really exciting updates to how our venture programs work.
The real purpose of today is to talk more about some changes that we're making that really are focused on benefiting the faculty, and you'll see that in terms of how we're doing them. So where I wanted to start today was in looking back, over the 10 years that we've been working together with Penn faculty on their companies. The real founding of the Upstart program and later Up Advisors was to help faculty be able to create companies around their research and to provide applied research dollars back to the research and really just try to reduce the friction of getting something started and giving them an alternative commercialization path. We certainly are still focused on licensing, and even with a startup company, a license is eventually going to be a part of it. But sometimes it just makes more sense, maybe for the stage of the technology or the market it's in, that we can try to go after a company as a first strategy for commercializing. And in doing that, we created PCI Ventures and the Upstart program within the realm of the patent policy of Penn. And I think it's important before we start here is to really kind of step back and understand how Penn's approach to commercialization and management of conflict of interest is different than many of its peers. So when you look across the Ivy League and MIT and Stanford, their approach to conflict of interest as it relates to companies is that a faculty member can own 100% of their company. But that company cannot sponsor research back to the university and can't have a relationship with the lab of the faculty member. That's one way to manage it. Penn has chosen to take a different path, and that our patent policy says that our faculty members cannot own more than a majority of the company at the time of licensing, once there's a relationship between the company and Penn, but it can sponsor research back to the university provided that the faculty member is not in a control position and making controlled decisions on the company. We've always said at Penn that we want our companies to have relationship back to the lab. We want these to be vehicles to create sponsored research and to create applied research dollars for the faculty. And in order to do that and still staying within the confines of conflict of interest, this is a different way to approach it. What that meant was that we had to design Upstart to fit within that box. So, we have to manage the program and say, okay, our faculty can't own a majority of the company at the time of licensing. So how are we going to set this up? And that was how we came up with this sort of 51-49 model at the beginning of Upstart, meaning that 51% of the company initially be owned by the faculty, 49% for Penn. Now, yes, that does put them in a control position at the start, but through bringing on staff and management, we knew they'd be diluted down by the time of licensing, so it was going to be fine. But of course, that meant that they are diluted by bringing on other management and staff. And so what we've decided to do is to make some changes to try to help give our faculty any dilution protection from that while still staying within the realm of the patent policy. So the decisions and the changes that we're making are listed here on the slide. We're still going to start with 51%. So the faculty are going to have to take some amount of dilution to get below 50%. We imagine them probably being around 49.5%, 49% at the time of licensing. But we'll keep them there by Penn taking a disproportionate amount of dilution from the bringing on of first the CEO, but then other team members and board members, advisory board members, people that would get a small amount of equity, but that can build up over time, and our faculty would take that dilution in the past. By giving them this anti-dilution protection, they can stay very close to the patent policy limits while still being able to build their company and bring on the team that they want. Now, of course, once the company gets to a point that they're starting to bring on funding and bring in investors, at that point, the decisions on how the company is structured really start to move outside of our hands. And so we've said, once funding starts, then it's going to be proportionate dilution from then on. And I think that's, pretty much the way it needs to be with the other outside of third parties coming in. We really need to have a set standard and really work toward the standards that are acceptable in business. The only caveat to that is that if investors said they wanted to see a different structure, we can certainly do that. We are still starting LLCs, and when investors come in, they often want us to convert to a C Corp. So there's changes that we can make at that point. But for us right now, this would mean dilution down for Penn until we get the funding, and then it'll be proportional from there. We've also asked that we put a 20% minimum on there, so we're not going to dilute all the way out as part of the bringing on outside management and advisors. But realistically, in most of our company's case, this is hardly ever going to be an issue. We don't typically give out that much of the company to outside people prior to the license and prior to the bringing on of external funding. Also, as with previously in the Upstart program, no additional equity will be asked as part of the IP license agreement. So these companies still need to get that license. The license will still have the standard terms and conditions you would expect from Penn, but we won't be asking for any additional equity. The equity from the IP will be taken out of the Upstart ownership equity, and we'll manage that on the outside. So it's not something the company needs to worry about. So this is the big change we're making. It is big in consequence, we hope, for the faculty. It's small in terms of its actual change to the way the program is run, but we think that it really is going to be a big help for the faculty and encourage them to want to do this while staying within the limits that we have in terms of Penn's patent policy, which we're fine with. We just want to try to maximize the opportunity. I would say potentially the bigger change is the change we're making to Up Advisors. In the Up Advisors model, we previously took 10% of the company's equity up front as compensation for the services we provide. We decided to change that and say, no, we don't need to make any ownership at the founding. So we'll let the faculty founders own 100% of the company at founding. We'll simply ask that if the company does get to a point where it takes outside money from somebody else, that we'll have a safe input in place of $50,000 that will convert into equity in the company at the time of funding. And based on the cap that we're putting on the safe, we expect that to translate into about 5% equity in the business. Now, obviously, this is a much lower touch model than Upstart. This is more of, as the name implies, an advisory model. We're not involved day to day. We're not on the board of the company, but we still do want to make sure that we offer as much as we can to help these companies succeed by giving them a manual of how to do this, to holding their hands to the process of getting a company going, and having office hours for the companies as well. Additionally, I don't want to forget to mention that with both Upstart and Up Advisors, we also now have a mentor in residence program that we found has been very popular. We have 7 mentors from around the community. These are all retired executives. I use the word retired very loosely. They're all extremely active, busy individuals with lots of projects going on, but not necessarily a full-time position somewhere else, with the exception of one of the members who is a partner at Untitled Ventures. But everybody else, being a mentor is a part-time thing for them, and they've been incredibly gracious with their time and incredibly helpful with the companies in their advice and counsel and connections that they've been able to make on the company's behalf. Going back to Up Advisors, the other important thing to make sure we understand is that the SAFE will be independent of the IP license. And so because we don't own any of the company, when the company is going for a license, there will be equity requested as part of the license. So that will be a different arrangement than you have with Upstart. And I think it's important to make sure we highlight that specifically so there isn't confusion later on. Upstart, there will not be additional equity requested. Up Advisors, there will be. And of course, the other important thing to remember with Up Advisors, as we tell every company we form through this model, that we're starting it this way, knowing that it's not in compliance with the patent policy, and it will need to be within compliance by the time the company goes to create an agreement and structure an agreement with Penn and start to negotiate that agreement. So it's not even the conclusion of the agreement, it's the negotiation of the agreement with Penn. And so at that point, you need to be back within the lines of the policy. I think we would have done this a lot sooner had it not been for COVID, because we certainly wanted to have an opportunity to have something more in person and even to be able to visit faculty directly to talk to them about the changes. So you can look at these changes and say, not a big change, but we think that it is a substantial alteration of the policies so that our faculty feel like they have the best opportunity that they can. And quite frankly, now the way this is structured in compliance with the patent policy, building a business on their own versus building a business with us, it's going to be about the same in terms of the economic opportunity for them. And that's really what we want to do, is to make that equating. As always, faculty still have the ability to start a company on their own. They do not need to work with our group. They are free to do that and not use us. We're hoping that the opportunity now with Upstart should be about the same, so lessen their desire to do that. But I also want to make sure I point out that regardless, any faculty member at Penn should always feel comfortable coming to us to ask questions about their commercialization plans. If they have their own company, we're happy to review agreements, situations that they have in front of them. We never want anybody to feel uncomfortable about coming to us with questions, regardless of whether they choose to use Upstart and Up Advisors or not. We're here as a resource to the university, and we want to be supportive of our faculty and grad student founders and in their pursuit of commercializing Penn IP. That's really important to us, and so we're always here for people.
How will these changes impact founding CEOs?
The changes shouldn't impact founding CEOs at all. CEO will be the same. We still will keep our same structure, which is typically to grant somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% equity at the founding of a company to a CEO, with then putting milestones in place that they need to accomplish in order to retain the equity. That shouldn't change. Should be pretty much still the same.
I believe these programs are available for staff as well.
When staff form a company at the university, they need to get approval from their school to be able to do that, from, consider it their employer. If they have approval and they have support from their organization, and I mean that all the way up the ladder of the administration, then yes, we will work with staff. But I will tell you that there are schools at the university that are very concerned about conflict of interest and have different sets of requirements of staff versus faculty. So be aware of that. I'm not and we at PCI are not the policy police, but we want to make sure everybody's informed of the policies and help you as much as we can to stay within the policies as you build companies. But we'd love to work with as many people as we can at the university. Everyone has great ideas. And so we try to find ways that we can work with everybody that we can.
For Up Advisors, what else is offered besides mentoring in exchange for the SAFE?
So we offer a lot of different services for the companies, starting with, when we talk about that we have a manual for how to start a company, it's not some high level 30,000 foot document. This is very granular in terms of how to do this. And so we give the manual to the company and then work with them to walk through the steps. And it's to the point of, this is how you name the business. This is where you need to go to get a URL for the business. This is how you file with the state of Delaware. Not only this is how you file in the state of Delaware, but this is an organization that we use to do that. So we can actually direct you to the service provider that can help set up the company. So the assistance that we provide in that regard, while as opposed to Upstart where we're doing everything for the faculty, Up Advisors were working with them, we're still there supporting them every step of the way to make sure that gets done. Beyond that, as I mentioned, we have the office hours, which during those office hours, we can help with SBIR grants, which we find a lot of our Up Advisors companies, that's really the first step that they would like to pursue in their strategy, is applying for an SBIR. So we're there for them during that time, and being able to walk through the application, how it's written, the budgets, and how to put the budgets together, and really make sure that we can help them to do that. Also, we're also very attuned to our Up Advisors companies as they move along the progression path. We want to know when all of them are raising money so that they are a part of all of our pitch days that we have, introductions to funding sources that we have available, and make sure that they're being given the same attention that we would give to any other company in terms of trying to help them get over that momentous goal of doing that. If they need, very often with Up Advisors companies, they know who's going to run the company, which is why they don't necessarily need to be Upstart. They have somebody in mind. But if there are other staff that they need to bring on board, we can help make connections there and try to help them to build out the team. So we're very much still supportive of all of the different aspects of the business. We still have service providers that we can recommend to them if they need help in certain ways. We're just not simply, I would say, more often doing it for them. We're just being there as very close advisors. I would just say this year looks to be so much incredible opportunity in front of our companies. We have multiple companies that either already have applied to the FDA or are applying to the FDA for approval. So we get multiple products this year for the first time approved by the FDA for sale, which is incredible. We have several companies now, at least two that I think of for sure, that are doing human clinical studies. And both of those companies are going very well and could actually potentially, hopefully, exit this year, which would be great as well. So there's so much going on in the portfolio. On the engineering side, our two robotics companies are doing exceedingly well, which is so exciting. And we have so many new companies on the horizon that are starting out in Mike and Bhavana's portfolio, new companies that are coming, which we won't announce yet, but look to be incredibly exciting. And so there's so much going on, but we're here for everyone. If anybody has new ideas they'd like to bring forward, we're certainly happy to help and talk to you about your projects and where you'd like to go from here.